hospital down there. It's usually 59 minutes, hour and 25.
Good.
Everybody's
All right,
work,
you guys. You guys are ready. I know we're gonna have a few people kind of trickle in the next, hopefully, a couple minutes. But just go ahead and get started. Be respectful there by this time. Kind of get going today. Before I get too far, I do want to mention that tonight's meeting is in person only. We are still recording it for internal uses. And we're able to record the meeting and post it online later. Reason for in-person meeting is the county is currently going under a cyber issue we're trying to resolve. Or not we, OIT, they're the all-stars here. But so that's why this meeting is a little different than others. But we've done the same advertising, and we're still going to do our best to post everything online after that. So if you want to get started, we do need to get a motion for the agenda and the notes.
So moved.
Perfect. And all in favor?
Aye.
No? Perfect. Okay. Go next slide. So tonight, what we're going to do, it's going to be the same thing we've done through the previous meetings, topical meeting, focusing on schools and housing tonight. And then hopefully we can wrap up the vision statement, which is be encouraged to do so tonight, because the next couple of meetings, we're going to be really diving into land use and zoning. And we can touch a little more about that later tonight, but that's kind of the rundown for the time for the night. So just to give a quick overview status of the meeting, it'll be pretty quick. Next slide, please. So as you know, we finished the analysis. We're currently in the vision and the plan development stage. And that's for the last meeting, essentially for the draft goals and strategies. We're going to present them back to you, everything we create, make sure we heard you correctly as we have been. But tonight, this is again the last topic of the meeting before we get into the more of the meat and potatoes, right? The updated plan land use map, zoning map, that conversation's coming. And that we're going to start in a month from now. I think the meeting is April 3rd, if I remember correctly. And we're going to really be able to kind of give you a rundown of all the applications that are coming in, that have came in, as well as just general over ideas of land use and zoning for Region 8, and get your input on it, see what you guys recommend, and go from there. So we can touch more about that later tonight, and we'll definitely touch more on that at our next meeting in April, when we focus on the land use and zoning. So talking about the schools, what has Region 8? So the bullet points is everyone is very appreciative of quality schools. That's one thing, everybody wants to, have a good quality school to go to, live in the neighborhood, and really make sure that education is beneficial for all. And connectivity, something we've heard, not just for schools, but for the entire community, is being able to be connected in certain places with sidewalks or trails or other means of transportation. Again, keep South County rural. We appreciate the rural setting, character of the communities, and that's, keep that going. And then obviously the concern potential loss for farmland, based on increased development. Farming here, ag preservation has been a constant theme throughout this entire meeting process, and I don't see that stopping, and we're not trying to change that by. And then finally, concern housing and for future generations and affordability for the region. And we'll talk about housing after we get done with schools. That'll be here tonight. We have some great presenters in front of us. So to kind of just jump right into it, I'm going to pass it over to Kyle. He's from our schools. One thing I do want to emphasize again is, while I know his slides are going to give some more information about different topics and different aspects, the Region 8 plan is a land use plan. This is about land use, zoning, and overall ideas connected to that. I know a lot of things that Kyle may mention, maybe touch on, have a Venn diagram where we kind of touch the middle. But the school's process and their processes are a different section. It's a different outlet. So if you can, try to keep your questions and your comments more focused around land use, zoning, and those ideas. But if you have anything technical, maybe we can email him or take it offline, just for the respect of the timing of the group. So with that, Kyle.
All right. Good evening, Kyle Roden, Director of Facilities for Arundel County Public Schools. jump right into it. So one of the big topics that we're working through right now is redistricting phase 2. So that process started in February, and it's going to hopefully end in November with the decision by the board. So right now, the public is allowed to use the web tool to provide us comments. We are reviewing those right now. We're actively reviewing. Just to give you some statistics on where we're at as far as community engagement on this. So we have had over 86,000 viewers of that website, 28,000 individual ones. So about everyone that logs on goes on about 4 times. 2.6 or 2,600 survey results so far, and 4,600 map comments. So my staff is reviewing those as well as the consultant. We are taking all that information in, kind of cataloging it to make sure that we're getting all the feedback we can so that we're making a refined and educated superintendent's recommendation for its submission to the board. So one of the big targets that we're looking at is the 2033 seat availability in the county. So the schools indicated in red are projected to be over capacity under the current boundary situation. As you can see down in Southern County, it's really looking more like the Tracy's area. Is kind of the focal point for elementary schools. When you get to the middle schools, it turns more towards Arundel and Crofton areas, and then the high school level is Annapolis and Crofton. So those are really the balancing that we're trying to do with redistricting.
But kind of just said, why 2033? Is there something that happens that year? Why was that year chosen?
Our EFMP goes out 10 years. Okay. The last EFMP was 2024. We'll update it again in 2025. We like to limit the amount of times that we're redistricting, and that gives us the furthest out projection.
Is that Tracy's or and Lenthian, or just Tracy's in the bottom left?
That's just Tracy's.
Just Tracy's.
So Lenthian is right above.
Okay.
One other question. You said Crofton is going to be the high risk area, or you said it's going to be over.
Yeah, Crofton is projected. It currently is over capacity right now.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, Crofton is only like 2 years old. Did we not build it big enough?
A normal high school that we built around 2,100. So the Arundel West or Severn Run High School that we just built was around 2,137. When we opened that, Crofton was 1,696.
So why did we go so small?
That was a recommendation from the last MGT study, was build a smaller high school. We found that it is smaller than what we need for some of the areas, especially high growth areas. So we'll be back towards that 2,000 number of our seats in our high school. So the Old Mill High School replacement, which is the next high school, is going to be around that same 2,100 number.
Is there any thought to making them all equal? So like adding on to Crofton High School?
It gets to be an issue with state funding. So if you have an adjacent school that has extra seats, the state is telling us that, we recommend that you redistrict to utilize the capital improvement project that you've already put in place and utilize those existence.
Okay.
So there's 3 scenarios. So the first scenario was really, we tried to do a balance of all the things that are in the school district's policy. But we tried to break up the 3 scenarios to focus on key areas, but also balance the other ones. So the first scenario is to optimize utilization. The second scenario is to minimize travel distance. And the third is to maintain assignment stability. So if you're in a current feeder system, we want to try to secure that feeder system as much as possible. We want to maintain cohorts. So if you're in elementary school, you stay with the same elementary school kids all the way through high school. Those are the key statistics. Again, the superintendent's recommendation hasn't been finalized. We haven't even started on it yet. We're still putting the information in, trying to get some ideas on how to refine. So it's going to be a balance and likely some new ideas with the superintendent's recommendation. So we encourage the public to keep submitting those information and survey results. That's very helpful for us.
Did you say that it could be something other than these three? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
during phase one, it was something other than the areas that presented. So again, public comments, February 1 through May 1. We'll close the public comments after May 1. I'll give us time to do the superintendent's recommendation. Once the superintendent's recommendation is presented to the board, we'll open it up again. The public will have time to comment on the superintendent's recommendation before it goes to the board, and then it's turned over. It's really a board decision at that point. Capital budget. We submitted a capital budget for a little over $204 million this year. We break it up into two categories: major capital projects, which are large-scale replacements, renewal projects, and then we have recurring projects, which are smaller ones, but still very nice. Those are like comprehensive maintenance projects that we do throughout all the schools. One of the biggest ones that is coming up is the program planning budget. So we did the MGT study in 2015. There was a update of the 2005. So we're at the 2025 mark. We'd like to do those every 10 years. Really get a roadmap of what capital projects we're going to be doing for the next 10 years. Starting in April, we're going to allow the public to provide comment on where they want us to go as far as capital projects. We're going to provide some data related to each one of our school buildings, educational adequacy, facility condition, age, energy use, and then allow the public to prioritize our score and grade each of the buildings and what order those are going to take as far as replacements or renewal projects. And with that,
That's it.
any questions?
How do you predict Tracy's will be over capacity in 2033? Is that what I saw
Yeah, Tracy's is actually over capacity right now.
right now? I mean, you're talking almost 10 years out, and it's still going to be.
So we do cohort progression, and then we also look at birth rates. We're seeing a consistent number of elementary school kids coming in through Tracy's. We have 2 portable classrooms out there right now, helping to balance that school and provide enough educational space.
I'm just wondering where they're coming from, unless, there's a fertility thing going on. Not any, complexes, neighborhoods or anything like that going in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no major developments out there. But we still see it continue. Higher population still.
Are there other developments and no major developments, but do you anticipate some development in some areas of that region?
It's definitely a possibility. We keep track of sketch plans that go through the planning and zoning office. And then what we do is if there are major developments, we do calculations on the number of kids that we project to be generated out of those developments. And then we give that back to planning and zoning, and they say whether it passes the open close or school utilization.
And Kyle might know more about this, but I believe there's also like a coordination between schools and OPZ GIS that happens once a year, where there is a schools report that we work on that shows some of that information on forecasts and school capacity.
Do you all take into consideration the adequate public facilities ordinance?
Yeah, so we're part of the adequate public facilities and the school utilization portion of that. We work closely, so when a developer comes in, they want to develop a portion of land, we look at the number of and type of housing that they're going to be developing there, and then we do school generation factors based on past generation rates for that development. Then we provide that back to the OPZ, and then they tell us whether that school passes adequate public facilities or whether it gets put on a wait list.
So then in the case of like Tracy's, it's already oversubscribed. It's not meshing to me, like, because clearly we're still seeing development.
So I believe the way that it works is that if a school is at capacity, And there's no, but based on the new schools APFO, if there's no capacity next door, right? Because that's one of the factors.
So they count the capacity of the adjacent, school,
Yeah,
not just the existing school. So, Tracy would be any school that touches Tracy. So you have Field, you have Lothian.
sorry.
If those schools have extra seats, then, developers allowed to develop up until those seats are filled.
But I guess my question for that would be, as we allow developers to do that, you then end up displacing, shall I say, other people that will, in this like redistricting plan, to now go to schools that they haven't been going to. So is it super fair to allow the development to come in and then displace everybody else?
I didn't,
I mean, it's not like, for example, I'll bring up the Crofton area, right? We allowed the two, or I can't remember, 2 rivers or 3 rivers to be built. And the whole time that thing was built, we said, you're going to Arundel. You're going to Arundel because you're on the opposite side of Route 3. Then it's built, and then we said, hey, come on over to Crofton. And now Crofton is overburdened, and we're gonna kick people who have been in the Crofton system out for so long to like South River down here in this part of the county.
Isn't part of the problem with the Crofton was that capacity before it even opened its doors?
That's correct, because they built it smaller.
Adequately in the first place.
Yeah, they didn't plan it right, and he already said that. They built it smaller than normal. But we told the development originally, you're not going to Crofton. So how did we get that? How did the land use area of that allow that to happen then?
so just to clarify, 2 Rivers is still part of Arundel. So it's not part of Crofton High School.
Is it 3 rivers then? Because there are people on that side of Route 3 that go to Crofton.
Yeah, there's a small portion, next to Route 3 that goes to Crofton, but the 2 Rivers development itself goes to Arundel.
Okay. What is that one that I'm thinking of then?
It's a.
3 rivers? It's like 3 something?
Yeah, it's an apartment
Yeah.
complex and condo or something along those lines. Basically, that went during the redistricting process, we had that go there just because of traffic patterns. It's easier to make a turn to Crofton than it is to make a U up with a school bus.
Right. And I have one more question on that. So then this is where I get back to like our purpose here of like zoning and all that stuff. So when that community was built, it was purposely built as a 55 and older community. So the school capacity issue was not thought of. So how do we as a board or something like that prevent builders or something like that from saying, oh yeah, this is going to be 55 or older, don't worry about it. And then as soon as they start selling to families and not 55 or older, bringing the kid problem. And I'm not saying kids are a problem, but you know, in this context, bringing the kid problem and now overburdening the schools.
So I don't know exactly how the process for development issue, went from advertising to 55 plus and then going to a whoever
Yeah.
age wise. I'm not even sure if that property necessarily was required to be 55 plus. So maybe there was just an advertising campaign or something to that nature. I don't know, I'm speculating.
Yeah, right, that's okay. Yeah.
So, but I think the heart of it though is a lot of it does come down to the development on the ground, right? Because that all impacts the APF that Kyle was talking
The schools, yeah.
So, well, a lot of this, and so development relies on zoning, development is density in this sense, and density relies on the zoning. So the higher the zoning, the more you build, the less you get, et cetera, et cetera. So when we start talking about these zoning categories, and we start talking about these areas and these recommendations that are coming in, this is an opportunity for you to provide your input. So we have about 30 applications from residents who applied for zoning change that you all will get to provide 30 recommendations. So whatever your philosophies are, whatever your thought processes are, I would encourage you to remember our vision, we'll talk about later, while you're reviewing these applications and make sure what you're actually recommending aligns with your vision and or aligns with the group work to that point. But again, a lot of it does depend on the zone. Because that's the first kind of domino to kind of fall. Now, the APF, if you believe there are APF issues, there are opportunities for comment on that. I believe there's a APF work group for the transportation kind of work going on right now. And I think there will be public comment at some point about that, but so I encourage you to, obviously always reach out to your council members, because at the end of the day, they're the decision makers here. So if you have a strong feeling one way or the other about how maybe things should be revised, or if there are issues that haven't been addressed, reach out to your council, because that's their job, is to help make sure the county is great today, but better tomorrow.
I imagine one of the difficulties with this is that the schools are physical buildings in fixed place that were planned out some past time. And if development does not go along with that, then you have some problems. And I'll look at Tracy's. If you did a population concentration overlay on there, you see a lot of stuff down Holland Point and Rosehaven with the far lower right tip. And busing those kids to deal would be a transportation problem just because of the way the geography is. So I think a lot of that goes into, and we can recommend for Region 8, but the Tracy's problem is probably more of a Region 9 problem at this point.
I think that sort of feeds into my question, which is sort of the question I have based on yours, is for me, the math and what you said about adjacent schools, it's not adding up for me. Can you explain that a little bit better, please? Or not better, differently, just so I could understand a little bit more on that one.
As far as replacement schools or?
Well, if your development plan is based on capacity, but you're thinking about the capacity of schools that are adjacent, but not truly where the people live or conveniently transport to, how does that mesh with?
So Tracy's at 0 seats available, and it's at 100%. Gill has 10 seats. Logan has 10 seats. They're gonna say there's 20 seats available for that developer to develop in Tracy's.
Yeah, so I think that goes back to what I said. So if that developer now comes in, those brand new kids are gonna go to Tracy's, and we're gonna kick 20 people out and force them to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I know, I get what you're saying about that part, because I live on Birdsville Road and that's happening, one of the proposed.
Right, yeah, okay,
right now.
right, yeah.
So Davisville Elementary is less than a mile away, but the kids are gonna be pushed over to,
Yes,
I don't even know where.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, which makes zero sense.
But yeah, that's where I'm seeing
But
this
I don't
land
want to turn
problem.
this into a discipline conversation. I'm trying to understand how did we get to this point so that our committee can do something about not doing that.
I believe the neighboring capacity was part of the new APF, which was part of an APF work group that, to be honest, I don't know who was on it, but I believe it was folks from the county that, like, departments that were on it, the APF work group, that submitted recommendations to the county council, and they adopted that legislation. So, there was a work group that adopted that legislation, that provided recommendations, yada, yada. And so one thing that I don't think has been said yet is that if a school is said to have be at capacity and the surrounding areas are at capacity, then development is closed. So once, I know that it is an issue because, like, in this scenario that Kyle gave y'all, there are 20 seats open. If those 20 seats are closed in the neighboring ones, the development is pushed for 6 years to align with the CIP. Like, a new development is not approved.
However, I heard that after the 6 years, they get it anyway. So it's not, you wait 6 years, but the reward is you get it. And an example of some of that happening is in Annapolis, where Annapolis High is way over capacity, and yet they're still building on Bay Ridge Avenue because they waited there 6 years. So I don't know the full truth and logistics of that situation, but I generally speaking know about the capacity only of that.
Is that true for the zoning aspect? Like,
We don't
if
work.
you wait 6 years?
I do know the 6 year wait.
Say that one more
There
time.
is a sunset clause.
A sunset, what does that mean? So 6 years and then you're good?
So with
Where does that come from? How do we affect that? Because that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I feel like we need to get back to
The ordinance.
Wow.
the.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, yeah.
I mean, but with all due respect, I feel like you're looking at capacity, you're looking at development versus school capacity. And probably the most important thing that we can do as a society is educate our children, and to do that properly. So if you're looking at a development that's going to impact the school for that particular area, I don't think it's right that you can have this out to say, well, this school that's really supposed to serve this development is at capacity, but, you know, this one's up here and this one's over here. They're adjacent. We can look at those. There's some capacity there. So we've got that out. We've got that overflow. I mean, with all due respect, I think that's totally counter to, you know, what should be, I guess, more of a purist definition of adequate public facilities. If the capacity is not there, then I'm sorry. And I feel like that's where, especially areas like Region 8, this is where erosion occurs in terms of our rural character.
I think there's always that push-pull between the developers and tax. Sorry, this is a legislative issue, correct? So if this group on some coalition, whether it's the group or individual, it's, from my experience in the county, this is a legislative issue. So it would be something that citizens would need to go to our legislator and say, hey, we think that the code needs to be updated because it's not in congruence with our Region 8 long-term vision. And so we would like to propose a change to the code. Because this, I don't think this gentleman, I don't think he can change this, right?
But at the same time, though, when we get these zoning, when we vote on the zoning thing, right, but what I'm saying is when we vote on the zoning things coming up, when we make comments,
Oh, I see.
is the school, are we gonna see on that zoning, request that we're gonna look at, you know, what, next month or the month after or whatever? Is it gonna say, okay, here's the current school and the adjacent schools and a capacity, or is that looked at somewhere else?
No, so that is not gonna be part of your review. I mean, you can take it upon yourself to do that extra leg, the extra step. But the short answer, no. It
Well,
is-
why not? Shouldn't that be part of the,
We
if
have
we
that,
recommend zoning or not zoning?
we have that information available. It's, we can provide it to you if you'd like. It's easily accessible.
Yeah, so the reason we try, when we get to the zoning application to do from the group, there's a lot of things that staff does behind the scenes for our staff recommendation.
Okay.
And then, so there's gonna be a staff recommendation and a SAC recommendation. When we try to make it as efficient and productive for the group as possible without getting too much into the weeds. And because there's a bunch of other things we could talk about, a bunch of different types of reviews. We talk to our zoning development team almost every other day about the zoning applications because we just and I simply don't know everything about it. But we talk to different agencies that do. And but we're trying to get that information in our analysis so you guys can do the more on the ground analysis. Because we have the academic, we have the practical, we have the institution kind of knowledge. Well, you guys have the practical knowledge. You guys know what works in the community, you know what doesn't work in the community. And I know you're talking about the schools and how it impacts the growth.
That seems like it's the tactical or the knowledge that we as a community want to talk about.
Sure.
To say, we don't want this because it's gonna impact our
But
schools.
those applications we're gonna be looking at, these are for homeowners, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it could be homeowners saying, I want to rezone and put 4 houses, which brings 10 more students.
Can I just have one, just back to like the Two Rivers, talking about that. My cousin lives there and has a young son, and part of the development is a 55 and up area, but I will say they built an elementary school just outside of it. So, you know, the county did do something to help with the development and the people there. I know not everything's solved super simply, but they do have an elementary school at the entrance into the community.
That actually kind of raises the facilities question and the concept of more facilities with smaller facilities or fewer facilities with larger facilities. How does that figure into all this?
Gets to be a balance of operating expenses versus capital expenses. Okay. It's operating expenses both on an overhead perspective as far as the school system. So if we have more schools, you have more principals, you have more overhead expenses, you have more support staff spread out. You also have a larger operating footprint, right? So for every building I have to have a facility plan associated with that. I have to have custodial staff, maintenance staff. We like to kind of thread the needle, so to say, and try to balance that. We do have prototype schools that we use for construction. We started our high school prototype Crofton. We expanded it with Severn Run, and we're using that same one. Same thing with the elementary schools. So Lothian up the road here, that's a prototype school. That's what our elementary schools all look like. If you walk into any one of the new elementary schools, you say pretty similar to Lothian. middle schools, we started our new middle school program, and that's around 1,100 students in the middle school. So we try to build off of those prototypes. It's a mix and match depending on how big you want to go. You can scale it up, right? So a low TN can go all the way up to almost 800 kids. We did that at Jessup. Jessup was 775 kids capacity in that school. So we have it so that we can flex to meet the needs of the individual.
I know we're having a lot of conversation around this and we probably need to, I just want to go back to what Anna was saying. If this is a legislative issue and you're thinking about a school as a cluster, like, you know, again, I'll go back to Annapolis, where Annapolis Elementary feeds in debates goes to A high. So Annapolis might have capacity, the middle school might have capacity, but the high school doesn't. Is it within our purview to make an actual recommendation that legislators would look at? And is that the goal that we have here, or are we just listening and then adding it on our individual opinion?
This is outside of that purview. That legislative process is, you say, I want to do that. My Diana Love, I'm going to go to my legislator.
But not as a group.
It's not this.
Okay.
Now, if the group decides to do that, because each person here says, I'd like to be involved in that, that's up to them.
Yeah.
That's up to, you know, we can't change an individual's rights at this point.
Okay.
So,
But,
yeah, that's
but all the
outside,
stuff we're discussing right here really
it's
doesn't.
outside of the purview of this.
What, to Alice,
But
that
the
more
county
we
council
can.
will see this, what we come up with,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so we could put that in.
Correct. So what I was going to mention, and I think right before Anna spoke a minute ago, which is exactly what I was going to say, even better than I was going to say, is we can create a recommendation for a review of the APF requirements in South County, specifically, because South County is very different from the rest of the county. We all know that, we're all aware of that, but sometimes, and then this is my opinion, and not just in Anne Arundel County, all over the country, a lot of lawmakers and policy deciders make what I call Band-Aids that are supposed to be applicable to everybody. And there are a lot of cases that those Band-Aids don't apply to everybody. And I think eventually this could be example. I think this is where maybe I'm stepping out of line, maybe I'm not speaking correctly, but I do think there are some things unique to Region 8 that should be evaluated under a different lens. And maybe the APF requirements is one of them. And I think maybe a recommendation to at least take a look. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but the recommendation should, I think, from what I'm hearing, sounds like somebody should reevaluate the APF requirements of Region 8 to make sure it actually it's feasible and provides adequate capabilities for within Region 8. So we can work on a recommendation and that's something the group wants.
Yeah. I have one last question. Do you think that it would be helpful, based on what Francis said here, to have information of the seats available now and projected 2033 for Region 8, so that we just, as a group, we have that knowledge of it?
Yeah, so, I'm not taking notes over here. So it's published online. So it's the Educational Facilities Master Plan. In the front part of it, we do projections for the current school year, next fiscal year, 2027, I think, and then we do one for 2033. But basically, every school has a page. You can see grade level, how we project on kids. So that's available online. I'm sure you guys would be able to get a copy of that.
We should email that out for the reader.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Yes, one question. Going back to redistricting, is there, I know you guys are still working with the pool and like people are still leaving comments, but is there one of those scenarios that is getting more negative comments than else, or are they all?
Oh, these?
Yeah. Just wondering.
I'd be hesitant to sway that opinion until the period is closed. We want to get unbiased opinions here. I just don't want that
Okay.
to be out there. But I think rest assured there's modifications that probably need to be made to all three to make them work.
I don't know if you heard earlier, because some people were trickling in, but he did mention in the first redistricting for the northern part of the county, it ended up not being one of these three scenarios, it became kind of a new compromise scenario. So,
I can tell you personally, I've read through all 4,600 of these map comments. And we do take them, categorize them. We look at the suggestions, some of them are really good, and we're going to apply those. And then each one of the scenarios has a little bit of a different tweak, and we take the good, the bad, the ugly from each one of those scenarios and kind of meld it. Get the superintendent interpretation.
Well, thank you, Kyle.
Thank you guys.
Appreciate it. If you guys have any questions that you think of, between now and whenever, feel free to email us, me, Jesse, we can forward along and you guys can actually. With that, we can take a break now if you want. I know we're actually pretty early in the night. We can wait to push the break, take a break now. Okay, to you guys. If not, conversation. So, all right, we'll keep going, Jesse.
All right. So our second topic of the night will be housing. And before we turn it over to Nori from ACDS, which is Arundel Community Development Services, I was just going to give you all some information on housing in Region 8 and also about missing middle housing, which a lot of folks have been talking about recently. Yeah. So this slide just shows the development permits issued in Region 8 over the last 20 years for new housing. In the last 15 years, the county has approved fewer than 50 housing units per year in Region 8. And in the next 15 years, we forecast only about 300 more housing units being built in the region. So for those not great at fast math like myself who had to run the numbers, that is just following this same trend of fewer than 50 housing units per year for the next 15 years. And that kind of tracks with some of the information we've already talked about in this group. Specifically, you know, a lot of Region 8 is zoned rural agricultural, and that RA zoning district limits the densities to 1 house per 20 acres. Also, you can see on this graph that there's like a steep decline after, you know, 2001, and in the late 90s, that's when the family conveyance law was updated to be done away with. So that's kind of tracks with those updates to the zoning code and family conveyance kind of working out of the system, and that's how we end up with these, like the current trends. And so, well, what types of housing are being built in Region 8? As you can see on here, it's mainly single family detached homes. Region 8 is about 80% single family detached, and the remaining 20% is mobile homes. So what goes into developing new housing? Well, the first is that there has to be a willing property owner interested in selling their property or subdividing and building housing. There has to be market demand. So someone has to be interested in buying a house of that size for that price point in that location. The government is involved. We set some rules and regulations about, subdivision and development. Additionally, the government, ACDS and the Housing Commission do build and manage some housing projects within the county, which I'm sure ACDS will tell you about in a minute or two. But by and large, most of the development in the county comes from developers. And those are the folks who are taking on projects, assembling properties, designing the community and the housing. They go through the permitting process and manage construction and sales. And finally, then there's the lending community. They are kind of in the background, but they are incredibly important because they are providing the loans and the private equity that goes into developing projects. And oftentimes they're looking for projects that will give them a return on their investment. So they're often looking for projects that are similar to those that have been successful in the past. So I mentioned that the county set some rules and regulations for development, and those can all be found in the county code. So we were talking about the adequate public facilities ordinance for schools earlier. That's in the code, somewhere in the code. I couldn't tell you where. So mainly what our office works on is the Article 18, which is zoning, and Article 17, which is subdivision and development. Zoning has two pieces: the zoning code, which is the text that tells you the uses that are permitted, the density, the setbacks, etc. And there's also the zoning map, which tells you which zoning district applies to which property. So you can kind of use them hand in hand to say, hey, there's this piece of land, what's the zoning district for it on the map? And then you go and look at the text in the code to see what are the permitted uses, etc. The county council approves the zoning code and the zoning maps. But y'all have a unique opportunity where you're gonna get to be hands-on with the zoning maps for Region 8 later this year. And so you'll be able to offer recommendations. You guys also have an opportunity to offer recommendations on the zoning code. So for example, when we were talking about schools, we said, you know, you don't get to, determining what is in the APF regulations isn't the purview of this committee, but you can offer a recommendation that maybe those APF regulations for schools should be updated. So as we continue this conversation, I just wanted to point out that there are different categories for affordable housing. There's like what most people think of when they think of affordable housing, which is, you know, housing like what ACDS works on a lot, which is really intended for folks who are of low to moderate means and providing some kind of income restricted housing. But also, you know, nationally, there's an ongoing conversation about the affordability of housing and the fact that a lot of median income earners are being priced out of the market. And so currently a lot of folks are talking about missing middle housing because it's a way to kind of diversify the market by introducing housing of different sizes and scales, which can then open up the market for some folks. And so I'm going to show you guys some examples of missing middle just so you're aware of what they are. I fully recognize that this is Region 8 we're talking about. Like I said earlier, a lot of this area is rural agricultural zoning. But keep your mind open. Think about, you know, areas in the county, maybe areas in your community or where you go shopping, etc., where you could see some of these housing types.
So on that note too, just to re-emphasize something Jesse just said was, so we have affordable housing here and missing middle housing. I think the term missing middle is a relatively new term, but I like to call it housing that's affordable. Because there's affordable housing, and then there's housing that's affordable. And what Jesse kind of outlined is the two differences with that. The other piece I want to emphasize what Jesse just said is the fact that what Jesse's about to go through now is we understand Region 8 is not like the rest of the county. So some of these pictures you may see may not be applicable to Region 8. I just wanted to reinforce that we understand the aspect to keep South County rural. We're not trying to put Pearl Town Center down here. We're not trying to put massive condos down here. But there are higher density developments that are considered missing middle, but we know that those aren't necessarily applicable to Region 8. So just keep that in mind. We hear you, we understand, and again, I just wanted to emphasize that before we get run out of the building. So.
Eric, can you clarify that one more time? I didn't understand it. There's affordable housing, housing that's affordable.
Yes.
What does that mean? That's what I need clarification on.
Fair.
I didn't understand that.
Affordable housing, what Jesse's talking about, is public housing, government assistance, stuff to that nature.
Okay, government assistance, okay, stuff like that. Okay, got it, yep.
Housing that's affordable is still, could be market rate housing, but you're not gonna necessarily buy $1 million vehicle.
It's not subsidized.
Correct, thank you, that's much better.
So it's not subsidized.
So it's market rate, but it's at different price points. So folks of different incomes can afford it generally without being rent burdened.
Is another word for this workforce housing?
No,
Is
not,
that-
no, we'll touch more on that in a bit, but no, not really. So essentially, it could be 1,000 square foot, smaller home compared to the 335, 6,000, 7,000 foot, larger mansion type.
Okay.
So the 1,000 square foot home, they still have the same per square foot cost, but you're not paying 6,000 square feet, you're paying 1,000 square feet.
Okay.
So it's going to
And
be
they're
more.
buying it on their own.
Correct.
No,
Correct.
like subsidized or anything like that.
Yes.
But like subsidies and government assistance.
It's
and all
like
that
different types of housing.
Yeah.
It's
It's like a
townhouses.
bungalow house versus a big
mansion.
mansion.
Okay,
Correct.
got it, okay.
So one thing that fascinates me, which kind of leads over this topic, is affordable versus affordable. I'm really fascinated. I don't know if y'all ever heard of a company called Boxable. You can buy it for $20,000 now.
Like a free
It's less than a trailer. I'm just wondering, just out of curiosity here, is, has the county looked into that, like the permitting and everything? Has that been a subject of conversation within the county? Because I find it fascinating, because, you know, before too long, my mother's parents are, I've been trying to build an addition, but it takes 2 years to get a permit, maybe. And, you know, I'm like, hell, I just slapped up a possible house there, spent 20 grand, and I'm doing it. And I just don't know if there's asking if there's been any conversations on that.
So I have to confirm everything I'm about to say, but to my knowledge is if you buy one of those, Lego houses, I'll call them Lego houses. You would still need the proper permits because you have to connect to the utilities, to my understanding.
Oh, yeah, no, I know you gotta get permits. and
Yeah, so again, it would be considered a dwelling unit for that property. So if you only have one dwelling unit for 5 acres, to my knowledge, that'd be the one dwelling unit for that 5 acres.
Okay.
However, if it's a tiny house and it's,
I can stack them,
it's movable.
and I can put them next to each other, and I can do this.
There are, yes, it's very unique. It is a very interesting concept. So I don't know exactly the specifics of what, if there's extra things you can do with them or multiple of them. I'm not sure if that.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering, because, you know, this is coming up, and as far as affordable housing goes, these things cost 20 grand, you put them up in an hour.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So as you guys know, I wrote a publication about missing middle housing, and I brought in people to look at it or order it in spring. The other reason why it's called missing middle housing is that this is the type of housing that used to be very common.
Yeah.
You have the,
Yeah, way to steal my thunder, Melissa.
So I work with the architect who does this, often. After the war, and people came back, they were like, oh, there was land, there were single family homes. So it kind of became that either developers were making apartment buildings or single family homes. And
A Arundel house in Glenburnie.
the missing middle became, the houses that were the bungalow houses or the pocket neighborhoods or the work-live kind of arrangements where there might be, housing above a store or a doctor's office, have in his house or her house. So what Dan talks about a lot, and this is where the affordability comes in, is that we went from, okay, you're living in an apartment that you're mostly probably renting, or you have to buy the house. There wasn't, a lot of development in that middle stopped happening. When we became a more car-centric and when zoning changed. And so the missing middle movement is a lot to like, let's bring back, and people can have smaller houses and that they own, and that are walkable to things that you're not always having to get in the car to get everywhere. So again, some of it could be suitable in some parts of South County, but some of the housing styles are really cute, would be really nice neighborhoods for people who want to downsize.
Yeah, that was gonna be my comment. The
Yeah.
South County, because of the way we keep saying, we want to keep it rural, basically at the same time says, we don't want that missing middle housing.
But that's where I think people need to understand what missing middle housing can be.
We're getting
Because
old,
what,
I wanna sell the farm, I need a place to live.
live, and I want to stay in this
And I wanna
this
stay there.
area.
But we continually say, we don't want to allow farms to be chopped up
Right.
and made into smaller housing, and we only let 1 unit per 5 acres. And when you only have 1 unit per 5
Yeah, and
acres,
that's what,
you get the missing middle in South County.
no, and it's not even a good place to put it because of infrastructure and services.
Yeah.
So I just was had Chris do a study today about this exact thing. And how, these things are very appropriate in places that do have more development already. Because they're going to be, the cost and the price, the value of the development itself increases when you're in a place that already has the services. It doesn't make sense to put things like that in places that do not have the services because of the costs. And then the value to the county that's collecting the tax goes way down when you put it in a place like South County. So revitalization of existing homes, the bungalows, the cottage towns, the cottage houses that are in Franklin and in different areas in South County is, in my mind, a great way to allow families to continue to live in unlivable housing units that exist today already and maintain the character of our neighborhoods. So we have hundreds of homes that are not unlivable. They are, people cannot afford to fix our houses up. Right? Yes, exactly. And so.
So what do you propose, to get rid of those?
No, to take the funds that we're talking about and revitalize them.
Like for people to purchase them?
They already own them. They can't live in them. They can't afford to fix them.
So like who would provide them the
Who would provide the funds?
money to
revitalize
fix
them?
That would have to be a program. If that's what's important to us, if that's what we're trying to accommodate.
So there's you're saying there's a program that we give people money to revitalize their own home.
Potentially, there's not one now, but there may be funds, or, there's a lot of people that go out and purchase these and fix them up and sell them. So purchase it from the grant,
Or
or
would that increase the price, then not allowing someone else to come in and buy it?
that is,
I feel like that's a suburban model more than a rural model, right?
that's a
No, I mean, currently, right now, like, it's very easy to go do something like that in Weston Apple, or something like that, but not as easy.
a lot of people have done it down here.
No, I don't mean, no, I think what you're saying is right, because if you were trying to do that as new development, it doesn't make sense.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're doing it for redevelopment,
Right.
how you get to that might be another
That's true.
conversation. Yeah.
That is true. That is true.
So yeah, Melissa covered this slide for me perfectly. I don't really think there's anything for me to add unless there's any questions. This slide just kind of shows, I think what Anna and Diana are talking about a little bit. So on the left, there is an example existing single family subdivision community where there are maybe some sheds or garages on the back or sides of some lots. And on the right, it shows the same lot dimensions. But in this example, there's a live work on the one street, and then some of the single family homes have been turned into duplexes, and there are some accessory dwelling units in the back. And I'll explain what some of those things are in just a second. But this kind of goes into that idea of it could be a redevelopment in an area that is already has infrastructure. So one of the examples is a courtyard building or a cottage courtyard. So these are tiny cottage homes or bungalows that line a shared green space. Think about like a U shape or an L shape, typically like around the green space. These are homes that have typically 1 to 2 bedrooms, and they can be typically, 1 to 2 floors. And so folks have been kind of energized about these recently because it provides access to a green space that you're not necessarily on the hook for maintaining or landscaping. They're private residences that are smaller, so they're good for folks who don't have as big of a family or have downsized. And also, if it's 1 floor, then it's easier for folks who might have mobility issues. So,
Does that count when you do something like this? Does it count as a dwelling? So for example, here we keep saying 1 dwelling per 5 acres. Would that count as a dwelling?
each one would be a dwelling. So it's your point exactly. If it's the RA zoning district, it's not really going to be feasible in this area or in an area zoned RA.
Okay.
That's in Galesville. though.
Exactly. Yes.
I just drove by there yesterday.
Yes. So the image on the left is from Galesville. It is actually managed by ACDS. So if you have questions, Nori might be able to help you in a minute. Some of the
Acronyms, ACDS.
Arundel Community Development Services.
Okay, got it.
It's subsidized.
I believe so.
They are, so that's called, that is called Tent House Courts.
Yes.
Tent House Street. Tent House Street, in Galesville. It is subsidized, it is to be sent out, ACDS owns and operates it. ACDS is Arundel County's housing agency. So we, I'll interrupt this later, but do it now. We administer state funds, federal funds for affordable housing programs and community development programs throughout Arundel County. So this Tent House Creek, ACDS as the county's housing agency, purchased the property, rented it into units, and they're all rented to people whose incomes are at 60% of the area median. I was also going to talk about that a little bit later, but I can jump in now as to what that means. But every part of the state has, and you rely on how to provide these figures. There is an area median income. So Arundel County is part of the Baltimore metro area, and the area median income in Arundel County right now is $122,000. So these units are restricted to people who make 60% or less. That's adjusted by their family size. But for example, if just 1%, but some of these, I think, might even be just one bedroom units. 1% lives there. 60% of AMI is $51,000 or less. And it's restricted, so they can only be rented to people who qualify.
Well, Pam, do you know what the rent's for?
Do not, but I can certainly find out. Well, I'm gonna do that. So, if a property is restricted to someone at, so in this case, 60% AMI,
Yeah.
their rent is capped at 30%. So.
For the year,
Yeah.
yearly rent.
So I don't have that map in front of me, but again, if it's one person and their income is $51,360, their rent is 30%. At the most.
Of the 50.
That's like 15. I was thinking 51 again. So the median was 122,000.
Yeah.
So 60% is 70. Yeah, but 60% is 73,000.
Instead of based on a number of people in the family. It varies for that household size. So the 122 number is, for a, 4-person. And not that expert on exactly how these numbers work. So a 1-person household, according to the way this is calculated by me, that's, I just share my list.
These are the HUD numbers.
Okay.
These are the head measures. These are available on our website and this website.
So there's fuzzy math here. It's not straight math.
It's probably weighted
Yeah,
for like
yeah.
the residents.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, the median family income of 122 is based on the
4-person household. Okay.
So this example just shows a duplex on the right and a fourplex on the left. There's also such thing as a triplex. Duplex, just 2 homes or 2 units, 1 structure. So in this example, we've got a stacked duplex where there's 1 unit on the top floor and 1 unit on the bottom floor. Say a triplex could also be stacked. A fourplex could be stacked and subdivided, divided internally. In this example, we have a fourplex that's side by side. You can also do duplexes side by side or triplexes side by side. Duplexes, like Melissa said, super common up until around like the 1950s-ish when they fell out of favor and when zoning codes were updated. You can look at like any older city and see a good number of these, especially if you take a look around Annapolis. This fourplex is actually from Gambrills. The fourplex does kind of look like a mansion from the outside, but a duplex pretty much looks like your standard single family home. It's just got 2 units in it. There's also such thing as a multiplex or a mansion apartment sometimes, where it looks like a mansion or a really big home, and internally it's a couple of different units.
Yeah, there are houses off of 424 that kind of look like, if you look at it and you're like, wow, that could be subdivided into like 6 apartments.
Yeah.
They're so big.
And so then y'all have talked a little bit about accessory dwelling units. They're also sometimes called granny flats or in-law suites, which are units that have a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, a separate entrance, and they can be attached to a main residence. So for example, in this photo, it's probably above the garage there. And as of 2023 in this county, you can have them be a standalone structure on the side yard or in the backyard. And for a standalone structure, the requirement is, or I think in either case, the requirement is that the accessory dwelling unit cannot exceed the lesser of 800 square feet or 50% of the floor area of the principal residence. So there is a size restriction for ADUs, but I believe they are permitted in the RA zoning district.
So it doesn't count as a dwelling unit.
That it's correct.
Okay.
Do you know if there are any use restrictions on them?
I'm sorry.
Any use restrictions on the ADUs?
What do you mean by the?
Well, so my sister lives out west and owns several properties in Colorado and Arizona, and I asked her about the ADU concept, and she said, "Oh yeah, we have them out here. We call it something else." She said, "But 90% of them are used to B&Bs." So
Yes,
Yeah.
so I do think there's some restriction to it, but I don't know what that is. I know the ADU bill, I think, passed a little more than a year ago, so it's relatively new to the county. I'm not super familiar with what can and cannot be, but I can look at that.
yeah, because I mean, you know, the intent would not be to
Just to rent it out,
Yeah.
yeah, or Airbnb. ADU.
Right.
Yeah, I think, they can be Airbnb. Some places have owner occupancy, that the owner has to live on the property, and then the other unit, even if it's Airbnb, but owner on the property. One thing about them is so they cannot ever be sold separately from the property, the primary
Do you
dwelling.
know if that legislation was part of that, the law, the work to make it where people could have their company on their property so that here in our area,
Yeah,
people didn't have to go rent space somewhere else because they weren't allowed to have their
Right.
trucks on there?
that wasn't part of the same thing.
Okay. I think it's important that people be able to afford their small businesses.
Right, like, I grew up with the doctors and the dentists worked out of their home.
I think before we leave tonight, we should talk about the workforce housing and potential. I know in this past, we talked about, I think there was an idea brought up about housing for farming help or something of that nature. They're living on property, working on that property. But I would like to, I think that'd be a good conversation to do tonight if we have time.
Just real quick before we take a break or turn it over to Nori, some last thoughts to think about are increasing the diversity of housing. Missing middle can increase the diversity of housing. So like we said, it can introduce new housing types that aren't as frequently seen, but it may not meet affordable housing definitions. So if you think about that accessory dwelling unit, it may diversify housing, but for all intents and purposes, it is a 1-bedroom apartment, most likely. And if it's not income restricted, like with the traditional affordable housing program, then it is market rate. And if it is market rate, I don't know how many of y'all have been looking for 1-bedroom apartments recently, but they can be up to like thousands of dollars. So it diversifies the housing, but it does not necessarily make housing affordable. Additionally, the supply is likely to be modest as the market adjusts. As I noted, the lenders and lending institutions are interested in providing funds for projects that are tried and true. As we noted, these things aren't as commonly seen, so it's going to take a while for, first of all, development to actually occur, and then secondly, for markets to catch up. And then thirdly, there are some code challenges regarding, maximum density requirements, parking requirements, and lot dimension requirements.
So on that too, given the conversation we've had about how Originate's different than the rest of the county, and that there are limitations to what Originate can handle infrastructure through the infrastructure it has, just to kind of reiterate a point we talked about a couple minutes ago, is the Originate does have one designated village center. And I know we're going to talk about that. I think we're going to talk about actually in the next meeting, that have more time really kind of focus in on what the overall vision and ideas are for that. But right now, as it stands, a lot of the pictures and ideas that Jesse talked about are not applicable anywhere in the county because of zoning code. The code is not allowed for. So if you think any of these ideas would be applicable at any point or any part of Originate, it would be worth noting and stating as a group that, it would be important to reevaluate the zoning code to allow for some types of these housing in certain or specific areas of the region. So just leaving it there. Moving on to the next slide, since Melissa wanted to jump our presentation earlier, I'll give it to her. We put this in for her because she actually emailed it to staff at the kickoff meeting. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of throw that spot. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I work for AARP. We do community grants. And, in order to get communities to think more about, different types of housing, and especially for older adults, you know, who want to stay in the community, but don't need their big family house anymore. So we helped several communities, host a housing design competition. So it was, you know, professional architects and designers, architecture schools. And, what has happened with it is that, you know, they do the competition and, you know, they pick out, you know, different plans, and the county will pre-approve the plans for a lot of things, not everything, but they will pre-approve a lot of the plans, so people can either buy the plans from the architect. Some communities make the plans available for free for anybody who wants to, you know, build something in their yard, a family member. So it's just an interesting way just to kind of educate communities about how we function, and where municipalities could actually help defray some of the costs by making and they did it through a competition. So that's a downloadable only publication. But the goal was had to be like an ADU for Mrs. Middle and Sky. Nothing, you know, they were saying, you know, here, design a greenhouse, you know, and it had to be a small home. That was also had universal design features, which are features that allow people of all ages and abilities to be able to use the home. So that would be, you know, at least 1 step way of getting to the house. Safety features in the house, wide enough hallway, and it had to have a window shaker, or you know, a bathroom and a shower that you could get into. So yeah, so that we put that out last year.
Thank you for saying that. So, all right, so we'll hand over to Alana.
To increase diversity of housing, but may not be affordable housing definition. So when I was privy to this study that was done over on the Eastern Shore to determine where the density of housing was most productive for not only the county, but for the residents and for the future value of that land, I asked, I said, where's the demand for affordable housing coming from? And he said, he gave me the number of units that he thought the state was short. And he said it's the aging that need to go, you know, to somewhere, and the young who feel they have to take their parents. And I said, you know, as a culture, we've come to believe, at least my understanding is that we're supposed to do this, that, and other thing and have our own house. Where some of us may not have that mindset, you know, it's like, wow, wouldn't it be great to have more family together? And so the ADU is a great option, I think, that the county did. And it sounds like a fantastic solution, especially for places like South County, where it would accommodate both of those potentially as a stepping stone. And so it feels like a really, and the design that you have is almost like perfect. I don't know if it's 1,000 square feet or 800 square feet, but
It's under effects.
yeah, so you could do that program that you just proposed in any area, or whatever the requirements are for that particular zoning code for that particular jurisdiction, county, or area. So it was interesting to hear that that's where it's coming from, and it's not necessarily a whole bunch of people coming in. It may be, but if the goal of the region is to preserve, you know, the heritage and the open space to the best of their ability, then certainly the ADUs could accommodate either aging and or young. So,
I have an ADU, my house is in one of that, I think in that publication, which I built to
from the outside, it's just my house. We were able to divide a part of it that can be a private apartment for my mother, who was one of my three kids, and if they choose to move back, right? Yeah, we all get to be together. The one problem being used where it says it may not meet affordable housing definition is because an ADU can only be built by the property owner. You know, there's no developer gonna come in and build an ADU on your property.
Right, and
You have to have the
but it's still meeting it's meeting the need.
It is
because
meeting a need because you're providing housing for somebody.
who would otherwise be in that pool.
Yes.
So you have actually met the affordable housing definition if you can open your mind to see that, yes, we just took 3 people off the market or however it is.
And the footprint has remained the same.
Exactly.
And, you know, and there's certain things about, because we're on septic and you have to, you know, keep all that in mind.
Correct.
But in order to get the permit to do it all, you have to test your septic. And we have X number of bathrooms.
So washing machine, just as a side note for.
Yeah, the ADUs are really great for our area because you have so many people with land and, you know, have to leave their home where else if they could put a little bungalow. I have neighbors who want to let the kids, one of the kids have the main house and they would just move into a, you know, a converted barn that can be 1 story.
Sorry, I just wanted to point that out for you.
Do y'all want to keep going? I know you guys sometimes take a break. Do you want to do this presentation, take a break?
Good to go or need a break? Go, keep going? All right.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. So my name is Nora Suter. I am the Chief Affordable Housing Officer at Arundel Community Development Services. I will say, full disclosure, I have been with ACDS for 2 months, but I have had a long career in affordable housing. So if there are questions that you have that I don't have all of the meeting answers for, I can certainly, my contact information is here and I can reach out to me and I can get back to you and get in touch with the right person. Our Chief Executive Officer was supposed to be here tonight, but she had an emergency, so I'm chipping a little bit. So what is affordable housing? So we kind of already talked about this a little bit, but, and this will be the focus of what I'm going to talk about, really, what is affordable housing? Not, you know, some of the issues that you were talking about earlier about where does development go? How does development go? What does it do to schools? That's not really, not what we do or what I'm going to address. Although it was interesting to listen to all that. When you talk about affordable housing, it's something that is affordable to the person, whether it's rental or home ownership. That person doesn't pay more, or the household doesn't pay more than 30% of their income. So even for people who are not lower income, you have a full-time job and you make whatever you make, you want to spend 30% or less of your income on your housing expenses. So what we do at ACDS is we focus on affordable housing. Sometimes it's called workforce housing. Someone mentioned that earlier. That can be a term can be used a lot of different ways. Generally in the affordable housing world, workforce housing is housing provided for people of low to moderate income. These are the working people that they're going to work every day, but they don't make a lot of money, but they're doing those low wage jobs. That's kind of what we tend to refer to in the industry as workforce housing. Affordable housing, there is, we talked about earlier, subsidized housing. Sometimes it's a bad rap. You know, people think about Section 8, it's like this bad odor that people throw around. That's the truly low income public housing. That's serving the lowest of the low. Workforce housing and a lot of other affordable housing opportunities serve people at, again, 60 to 80% of area median income. We also have something in Anne Arundel County. It's not effective yet. It will be effective on July 1st. It's called the Housing Attainability Act. In other counties, it's called an MPDU, moderately priced dwelling unit. So starting on July 1st, any new developments in the Arundel County will have to provide a certain percentage of affordable units in those developments, and whether those developments are homeownership or rental. I have some more information on that in a later slide.
Can you say that one more time? There has to be, they have to provide that?
So the MPDU on the Housing Attainability Act, yes, for any new development, homeownership or rental, 10 or more units, certain percentage of the units have to be reserved for rent or purchase by lower income households.
Now, do those units need to be of equal value to all the rest of them that they're building?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not effective yet, it's July 1. And I have a slide on that at the end of this. We can maybe come back to that, if that's all right.
Yeah.
All right, so next slide. This is a great example of who needs housing and what their incomes are. So to your question you asked a little bit earlier. So, and who it serves, people who are in personal care services, who do work at nursing homes, hospitals, food prep, serving, maintenance, construction, education. Unfortunately, our teachers don't get paid enough, and social services. So most of what we do is the 60%, we focus on that. And that number is a little bit different than my number, so that's about where it is. And this is the rent that they can afford. So let me go to the next slide. And we see that just to consolidate this first line, that amounts to about 28,000 people in Arundel County are what's called the rent burden. They have a place to live, but they're paying way too much based on their income and what their rents are. And I think you had a good example of what it costs to rent a one-bedroom apartment. So this is what our county is looking at. Let's go to the next slide. And all the pie charts, lots of very hard to read numbers. The key thing here is that sort of reinforcing that 12,000 people, 61% of low income earners are underserved by our current housing stock. And that's whether it's affordable, restricted rental properties or just market rate. And this is a similar example for homeownership. So especially when you think about young families and people starting out trying to buy their first home, to afford a typically price for in the county, you have to have an income of $164,000. In this Baltimore metro area, we are the second most expensive in Arundel County as a whole, just under, Howard County is the highest and Arundel is the second. So next slide. I think you had a similar slide in yours earlier, so if I'm repeating, but this shows the number of new residential building permits. This is both rental and homeownership. Was 24,000 for the years from 14 to 19, and it dropped to 1,600. So new rental and homeownership units aren't coming online. And one of the effects of that is the sort of transference of where people are working and living. Maybe people are living in Arundel County, we want them to work and live in interestingly, it's almost exactly the same number. 62% of the people who work in the county live somewhere else, and the same is true there.
So to live here, you have to work something like that.
Yeah.
To afford to live here.
Yes.
You can't afford to live if you work, if you work.
You can't afford to live here if you work.
There is,
So what does that tell you?
if you're interested in, there's actually currently right now before the Maryland legislature, there's something called the Housing for Jobs Act. It's an initiative by the governor. There is, and in that, the purpose of that job, the rationale for this Housing for Jobs Act is to address just this problem, that there isn't enough housing for the jobs in certain areas of the state. And there's proposed, so it hasn't passed yet. So those who are legislative junkies or really want to get into what we have, what housing we have and what jobs we have, take a look at that Housing for Jobs Act.
What is that Housing for Job Act? I don't think you really described what it does.
So the Housing for Job Act will, if it passes, will change zoning, planning and zoning development processes. It will require if a county or a region, they lump certain regions together. The housing in a region does not have enough housing for the jobs, and there's a formula ratio that they've come up with. The county planning and zoning offices will need to accelerate certain approvals of new development, and there will be restrictions on when they can deny new applications for new developments.
So in our case, how do you determine if there's enough housing for the jobs?
So
Because when I look at that
this is a proposed
statistic,
bill, so you guys
Yeah.
don't even know.
no, I understand,
It's
but
still, yeah.
when I
And-
look at
and
those
it's-
statistics,
Right.
we have enough housing. Because 62% people are leaving to work, but 62% people are coming to work. So to me, that's equal, and we have enough.
But why is that happening? Why are the people,
Yeah.
the ones who are leaving, I mean, the people who don't have enough affordable housing? I have to admit, I did not create these slides, so I might be misrepresenting this particular.
I think it makes sense though, because just like in the neighborhood, I live with my parents because I'm in grad school, but in the neighborhood that we live in, like a house that sold in 2020, it sold for $735. It sold in 2 days, 2 weekends ago with multiple offers for 1.1 million. So you just like thinking about that, it would be pretty hard to buy a $1.1 million house with the jobs in Anne Arundel County. Because Anne Arundel County doesn't have what Montgomery or Howard in terms of like large scale jobs. So it makes sense that people would live and work in other places. You might live in DC, you might work in DC, like a lot of my neighbors do, and live in.
My mom is in that call center, and everyone that she works with in this call center in Viva lives in Baltimore or lives in Prince George. So
There you
it
go.
is their company because it's a low paying job, but it's what they can afford. So how would we be able to accommodate them to live closer without touching?
Exactly, yeah.
At the same time, many people choose to live here because of the way it is, and they choose to go somewhere else because they want to work there. So that's a very like black and white comment, statistic that doesn't really address the nuances.
Well, let's just skip that comment, because I don't mean to be facetious. I don't have the background.
Right. That's why I like it. You have just as many people leaving as you have coming.
My office is in Prince George's County.
Yeah.
What I would be happy to do is to get some clarity on that particular comment. What I read this Housing for Jobs Act, the governor's office and the state of Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development have all kinds of statistics about what it costs, some of what we have here, but about why people are leaving Maryland. So their conclusion based on their research, and this bill that was not passed, is that Maryland is too expensive as a whole. It's too expensive to live here, particularly, and they're very focused on young professionals. And so they're moving over to Pennsylvania, they're moving over to Virginia, and not staying in Maryland.
Are they looking at tax rates?
That's where the jobs are though, like my job after I graduate is
That could be
in
one of the
Tyson's
largest-
Corner.
Pennsylvania tax a lot.
Yeah,
less.
but a lot of people like coming out of college, three of my friends moved to Baltimore, everyone else moved to Arlington or DC because all the jobs for at least people, if they're in Tyson's Corner, they're in McLean, they're in Roslyn. There's not really jobs. So it makes sense for at least young professionals.
Yeah.
And that is, so anyway, a bit of got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but let's go to the next slide. So how do we solve some of these needs? So we kind of already talked about this project, so we can move on from this one. These are more middle housing examples. And we can talk about that too. So these are rental housing development examples. So again, given the rural nature of this region of the county, probably these examples are not great for here. This one is, the brick one is in Annapolis. This one is in Odenton, and this I think is in Glenburn, but I'm not sure. These are just examples of what the kinds of housing that we finance through ECDS. The next one. So we also do ECDS as affordable home ownership. This is a project in the Burning area where we were, ECDS was able to purchase land and build these kind of small bungalow style. They're kind of middle housing, and they are affordable to families to own. I think they're slightly higher. They may be at 100% of area median income to qualify, but as we pointed out earlier, to buy a house in Arundel County, you need to be above our area median income. So this is a great opportunity to house a lot of the middle housing aspects of this. If you go in the middle, there's small bungalows set up. This is just, a little bit of what we do, what we've been working on. We have Housing Trust Fund money, which is in Arundel County. We have home is a federal affordable housing source, and we also get some county other money. This is what we've done in fiscal year 24. We've gotten 424 new units and 100,000 rehab units. So this top one is part of our scattered site program. So ECDS purchases single family homes, renovates them, and then rents them to families at between 50 and 80%. And we have 96 of those. Most of them are in North County, but someone was talking about you were talking about some properties where maybe, are those home ownership?
Yeah, the first house that I ever bought, I actually bought from ACDS, and it was, it's a Friendship Road.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, so I'm very familiar with that program. So yes, it is fantastic.
What is LIHTC?
LIHTC is the Low Income Housing Tax Credit. The federal tax credit, each state gets an annual allocation from the federal government, and then the state awards credits to developers. Developers then go out and find equity. They find people who need a tax break. Equity comes in, they buy the credits, they put all the money in up front, and then they get a 10-year tax credit. It's a huge driving force in the affordable housing world. So we are currently working on 4 projects. One is, I don't remember where they are. One is in Gambrel, so it's a great example of an infill development. It's going to be for family housing. It's right next door to a senior care. It's in that whole Watchapel, that development area. One is up in Glen Burnie, and then 2 are in the Overton area.
And are they all infill? So is that like bulldozing down trees to?
So the one's called Rural Protection Family. That is infill because it's right next to one that was just built near the Watchapel.
But they bulldoze to get that one, right? Trees and everything.
Watchapel is just a whole, that whole shopping center was, but it's there. And now what we're doing is the shopping center is there and all of those jobs are there. And so now we're housing right there. So, and that's, that's the kind of thing I think for this region, for you all to think about is where can you do this kind of infill development? The smaller and the middle housing, but we don't want that down here. That's great in Odington. That's not great here. It's great in Gambrels or maybe Annapolis. But where do you have transportation, water, sewer, areas that already have shopping, maybe sort of in the northern part of the region, kind of up by Boone, closer to the Boone area, would be good areas for some of this affordable housing.
So how much do you link in with when you do these types of things? So I'm thinking about the brief we just had, where that Gambrels area, they specifically said is over on student population. And now they're redistricting it all. And you're saying you're about to come in and build affordable housing so families can move in there.
Yeah, well, you can address that. And I'm just saying, from a housing perspective, these people need a place to live. They need to live and work near there. These projects go through planning and zoning, and they have to comply with all of the school capacity rules. Maybe you all know.
In addition to that, one thing that we've seen in studying like what's going on is that a lot of the new student generation for schools actually comes from existing housing stock turning over. So projects like those that are done by ACDS for, lower income folks, as Anna mentioned, a lot of the times it's younger folks or it's seniors. They're not folks who have as many children that are going to be needing to go into the school system. It's a lot more from the turnover of existing housing stock.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering because like she said, she's about to go build, in the last brief said, hey, this area is super overpopulated with kids. And now she just said, we're going to put in family housing here. So that worries me a little bit for overpopulation of the school system now.
But I will say, the terminology we tend to use in the affordable housing world is it's either family housing or it's senior. The term family is a little bit of a misnomer because, for example, this project that we're working on right now in the Gambros area will have 1 to 3 bedroom units. So there will be 1 bedroom units. There will not be children living in those units. So I think there's 90 units, and I think maybe, just trying to remember, maybe half of them are 1 bedrooms. So yes, there may be some children coming in there, but there might not be. And I don't know how you all, that's for your education folks, for the planning and zoning people. We're just gonna.
And the fastest growing household population is adults living alone.
I have 3 questions, but they actually kind of feed into each other. So when you look at your investments, the 13 million, is that money coming from money that you make on rentals, or is that come out of county taxes or what?
So different sources. So the housing trust fund is funded through transfer taxes. So that's money that comes to ACDS from the county. County general funds, the county has a commitment to helping build affordable housing for its residents. So there are some general funds, I think, in the tax dollars at the county. About 30% of our budget comes from the federal government, and that goes to Trojan Home. It's the name of the federal program. It's always capitalized, but it doesn't stand for it. It's not an acronym.
I find that really interesting. Actually, those numbers are interesting to me because I feel like if we want to make this sustainable, how much of the rent is, are we just going into more development with the money from the rent, or are we going into creating a sustainable program that won't require as much federal funding? But that's really besides the point for what we're doing here. So my second question is exactly what Anna was talking about earlier. The redevelopment, do you guys have programs specifically that could help if we recommended redevelopment here in our area? Do you have programs that would help make that suggestion possible?
We do have some funding available for housing rehabilitation. So a homeowner can come to us and request those funds.
And then the third question is, Anna, do you think a program like the middle housing would work in, random example, Galesville, Shady Side, somewhere that already has facilities, or do you think it's just not going to work out there?
Well, I don't know. I don't know the question. I mean, that's not really up to me. I will say that didn't this group or a group, county group, do something additional in Galesville already, in a certain underprivileged area?
So there's the Ten House Creek in Galesville that you might be referring to, but also for the Region 9 planning process, there was a recommendation in the plan that new housing development, I'm going to butcher this, I could find it for you exactly, but essentially that a new housing development or redevelopment be targeted for areas that are outside of the critical area within the village centers where there's existing infrastructure like roads, etc. And there's one other thing they wanted it to be, I think.
It was very focused and it was very, let's study. Let's not commit to it right away. let's not set our feet in it right now, but let's have someone study it, produce a plan, produce a document, show this is feasible, at least on paper.
Feasibility study.
Essentially, yes. So that was something that Region 9 SAC agreed to, because there was hesitation. And to be honest, there was some pause within the group. Because when you talk about missing middle, and you talk about this, and you talk about the current infrastructure of South County as a whole, there are questions, there are issues. And I'm more a transportation guy, and I tend to think that you need to make sure you have good transportation when you talk about smart growth, because I think a lot of people mention smart growth is just development, and they ignore the infrastructure. But I don't know, I'll get off that horse. But so the group worked through all these hesitations, worked through all this conversation, and they eventually recommended to study. Again, not to commit to anything, but just only to take a deeper dive into, is this actually something our region can handle? So if that's something this group is interested in, I think it'd be very easy to put into the plan that a study is needed or additional research or whatever you guys want to do. If you want to do that, could be put into the region.
And so I guess one thing also back to your question about this, the money that we invested into these properties. So these are loans. They are not grants. So there are repayment obligations. The terms are very favorable because they are serving lower income families. So in order to make it financially feasible for these private developers, but we do have program income, and on the scattered site projects, and we own and operate those. So we own them and we rent them to lower income families. We have them. So there's some program income coming back. And anything that comes back into ACDS, we then recycle into the next project and look at what our needs are.
I saw.
The other one that someone mentioned earlier, something about mobile home parks. So Erin, who was our CEO, who couldn't be here, she mentioned that I believe it's in Lothian. There is a large mobile home park that is possibly at risk of being sold or downzone, upzone, changed. Things like that, or something, a project like that is something.
They're sending untreated sewage into the Tucson Field.
That
They're
doesn't
getting
sound
fined
very
$1 million a day, and they can't pay it off. We gotta do something.
Okay. Well, that's, I don't know a lot about it, but that is an example of something. Sounds like maybe not the best example. Something that's already here, and if it weren't for a terrible problem, it's something that's already here. So maybe yours is a better example. Housing that's already here. Let's fix it up, and build something next to it. It's already there. We've got a little neighborhood. Let's build a few more houses right around there. I got one more slide. This is the MPDU I just touched on briefly. This is, it's been passed by the county council, takes effect July 1st. We're working through right now all of the final rules and regulations. But if a development is approved by the county, passes all the appropriate planning and zoning, school capacity, all of that, if it has 10 or more units, it will have to have some units restricted for affordability.
Is that only for like development going forward, or
Yeah,
maybe
it'll
like
be-
development?
Yeah, I forget what these, I know the law takes effect July 1. I mean, do you know what the trigger is? If it's I think it's an application. It's put in the first piece of the first application for, building permits. I'm not sure if it will start after July. So yeah, things are already in process. They won't have to. That is it. If there's anything else, I'd be happy to try to answer or take questions about that.
One of the things that I noticed from the previous study like this, for the county for our region, was they did designate 3 revitalization areas, and then specific to what they wanted to be revitalized. So as a group, that might be something we want to think about. And I know the Village Center we have is important, right? So I think just being able to say if that's going to happen, that would be great if this could happen here. And we talk a lot about preserving heritage and kind of the character and green space and gardens and things of that nature. So if we get to that, I guess that's next month. And then I'm pretty sure, and I don't know who did this, in Dalesville, I believe there was that one area, I believe it's called, let me just think, West Bending Lane, is that accurate? There was revitalization done there. I don't know through what program, but it's been a while in addition to that, center. But, I'm curious if that might be something this group would be interested in is, and the house that I bought, it was an historic property, and I saw preservation, and I think that was chosen by ACBS, if something is wrong, because of its historic nature. And so, would we want to say, if we're gonna look at this, and if there's an opportunity, which there, I realize may or may not be funding, to look at those types of areas, whether they're underserved, whether they're historic in nature, or something that might be worth preserving, for that purpose.
We have this, so a lot of the scattered sites that we do are, right now, most of those are in the, Brooklyn Park, Glenbury, and Severn areas, because we've designated those as sustainable communities. Older communities that have declined, that need reinvestment.
Yeah.
And that's, so yes, the state has programs that, so because we designated those areas as sustainable communities, that entitles us to some money from the state as well. But we can get, if you'd like more information in that, on that, I'm definitely not.
I think it was a great project in Dalesville. It looks really beautiful, and I see people who are workforce people moving into this area that were uninhabited before. Like that.
Down to next to the mention of the mobile
Box.
Right, but if that gets sold or people get evicted, that's gonna be a big issue. Or something to deal with.
Send that down here.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't realize I had some other obstacles.
So one thing, unless I'm interrupting, I don't mean to interrupt. One thing that we touched on, or Nora touched on, was the affordability of the renters. One thing I like to mention too is the affordability of housing is very important to understand. If you can actually afford to live, how much of their income they're putting into. There's this tool called the HT Index, Housing and Transportation Affordability Index. I believe, I could be wrong, the number, I think, what they say you should spend on housing and transportation should be about a third of your income, if I'm not mistaken. But I think the actuality of it is it's over 60% for most Americans. So that's how much are you paying to your mortgage and or rent, and how much are you paying to get to and from to work?
I do have a question on that. They said that those combined should be 30%?
Or, yeah, to my understanding, the powers that be, whoever created this HT index, I'm not sure if it's a HUD thing or not. They believe that to be able to live a comfortable life, you should spend about 30 right on housing. And most of more than paying 2/3 of their income on housing and transportation.
So that's because they're living beyond their means?
I mean, speculate all you want, right? But
Well, I mean, because there's a difference between, I just need a 2-bedroom
sure.
house that I can live in, vice, oh, I bought this huge house that I really don't need all of it.
Yeah, do I need my 65-inch TV or can I do a 30-inch?
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
So there are
Yeah, the middle
at the same
housing,
time, there
right?
are a lot of circumstances that people can't necessarily, each person has their own circumstance, I have to give, right? So I'm putting that out there. So one thing that I think Diana mentioned was earlier tonight was workforce housing. And then I remember a conversation with either one of you or the group talking about potential housing on farms for farm workers. Is that something this group would like to discuss, just so we as staff can listen? Or do you guys hate that idea? You guys just move on from it? which is something we can help work with, because again, Region 8's different from the rest of the county, and we haven't heard this conversation yet. We want to make sure we're hearing the SAC through and through on this. So if are there any ideas for housing for work, essentially?
I don't have a good idea by any means, but I have several friends who are.
Sounds good to me.
People talk about that.
I don't know, I don't have a great idea for that in particular, but I do have several friends who live down here in South County, but who have to work as teachers or firefighters in, like, it takes them an hour, 20, sometimes an hour and a half to get to work, but they wanted to live here because before it was affordable, and it's increasingly for them no longer affordable. And some of them are a teacher, like one family is a fireman and a teacher, and they can no longer afford to live even in. So that for me, I don't think that, the nature of our community is we bring people together down here. We don't make it unaffordable for average normal people.
That's a lot of economics and things of the world.
Yes, it is.
Taxes and all.
But you know, Leanna, you know me.
That's a beautiful thing, and it's also.
But how do we preserve that for them down here? That's kind of more what I'm getting at, is if there's any role that we could play in making sure that people can afford it and go to school. And
What is our impact on these big farms that are getting subdivided up and putting the McMansions on versus putting a small home on? Like, is there any sort of, if you could say, square footage limits, or?
So
How does that work?
I think the recommend, at the end of the day, property rights are property. If you subdivide your land, you can have a house, as long as you meet the setbacks and the lot coverage, all the regulations in Article 18, you're gonna be able to do it. So it's up to that property owner. Now, this plan can encourage property owners, can encourage people to do things, but unfortunately, when it comes to forcing people to build certain things, nobody can kind of do that outside, as long as you follow things up.
When you asked the question about the housing on farms, I think that at one point there were one or two farms or farming operations that were interested in that. And I think it's a great concept. I don't know of anyone who's currently seeking to do that. However, there are the H2A and H2B programs, and I know that a lot of farms are using those programs or want to use those programs, and you are required to provide housing. And the good thing is that the H2A program does specify very clear requirements for appropriate housing. And so I think most people that are doing it are probably either buying or renting somewhere where it is more affordable in this county, or in northern Calvert, for our particular region. And there may be an opportunity at some point in the future that some farms may be interested in doing that. I don't know of a strong demand right now.
I don't.
Yeah.
So my question, so when I brought this up, I was when I was thinking about the worker that was coming to help with the farm, are there any, I guess my question to you guys who are better knowledgeable than I am, are there any constraints or issues or limitations from the farmer to be able to provide this? Is there something we can do to help the farmer to help with this solution, or is it just kind of a non-issue?
The biggest thing to help the farmer right now is that, in my opinion, there's a lot of budget cuts at the state level, and one of the biggest budget cuts is agricultural preservation. It's defunding that entire thing. So if you're worried about development, get worried, because if preservation goes away, and at the same moment they announced that basically the county would have zero rates to specify where solar goes in the county. So the cheapest place to put solar is on farmland. So basically they're proposing to cut all preservation programs that would encourage farms to keep their farms in preservation, and at the same time, technically, by talking to some legislators, allowing for potential eminent domain. And I have to say that also by legislators that the state made a big mistake when they said everything has to be electric, when they didn't realize that they could not supply the electricity that's required for their mandates. So they're now forcing these solar panels and this type of thing on open space and farmland. So I'm very busy right now.
Is there anything we can do than to put it like on the top of the schools that already have?
I'm glad you said that, because the amendment that's going to be recommended from SACO and from us, from Arundel, is that a study should be done, feasibility study should be done before placing solar wherever you think it's cheapest for that solar company that's gonna make billions of dollars to put their solar panels. And oh, by the way, farmer gotta sell to us because we got eminent domain, because we made a big mistake and said everything has to be electric.
And the other scary thing tied to that, these cuts for agricultural preservation are being proposed for 4 years.
Right.
Not just the next budget,
100%.
but for 4 years. And then if you get rid of ag preservation, right now, if your farm's in preservation, you can't put commercial. So if you get rid of preservation money, then all these folks are gonna need to look for alternative funding sources. And I'm telling you, the solar companies are aggressively marketing farmers with somewhat attractive per acre rates over decades.
But can't we make a statement that says this, we recognize this is happening and something?
A lot of people are speaking up, so I'm just saying,
We as a
the
group?
farmers, oh, yeah, I mean.
Like, I feel like it should be on the agenda as a statement.
I think,
Yeah, we can certainly put it.
Well, I mean, the legislative period ends before this would
Yeah,
get to.
correct.
Yeah.
Right. So, at any rate, I think as far as the farmers go, we have a meeting next week with the Ag Commission, and we can certainly put it out there to see if there's a consensus of, what would be helpful when it comes to housing for workers. And if there's anything else that this region can do. I mean, preservation is really quite important. So I think, the language we've been speaking as far as historic and agricultural preservation is, paramount to maintaining the rural character that people come here for, whether they're visiting or whether they're coming to live. And if that's truly what we want to do, we need to fight for it.
Great place for solar is the parking lot.
Oh, yeah, parking ride.
That's been filling up. That parking ride in Davidsonville, on Davidsonville Road.
Yeah.
Oh, now, yeah.
Yeah, I ride by there every day. I mean, now it's like
Because
60, right? Exactly. Because we were talking about that.
But there's two parts of that. There's a lower part, the extension.
Yeah, the whole thing though, because
With solar, the cars can park underneath.
oh, like a
Yeah.
garage thing. Oh, I thought you meant like.
No. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it actually helps
Yeah.
the cars too.
Because Anne Arundel Community College has that in their parking lots. They have this. Yeah, there's.
So,
That's
to
what that could be.
wrap it back into the housing conversation, which is great. So one thing we talked about a few minutes ago, what the Reach 9 group did was, talk about a study, not commit to anything, but not turn it away immediately. Is that something this group is interested in, or do you guys have no interest?
Study for,
Just to evaluate different areas and potentially different types of missing middle housing that could be applicable to different parts of Region 8, pending, maintaining the character of the communities, maintaining the rural nature, all the stuff we've talked about. Now, again, that's something I want to ask the group that you're.
I mean, a study is better than willy-nilly.
I think it needs to be holistic though, like I don't think the study should be only the middle housing, it should be, what are you gonna do about the mobile homes and what's gonna replace it there? What are you gonna do to redevelop homes that aren't habitable? I think it needs to be holistic and not focused on only one section of housing.
But let's say that mobile home community disappears or something, that development would be perfect for the bungalow.
Yeah, so, yeah, it should be a study for where are the pockets and what could it handle, yeah. And how is it gonna be funded?
You're right, it's not impossible.
Don't you still have the same problem though?
Yeah.
Yeah, because where does the sewage go for those cottage houses?
Yeah, but if it was
So it's still the same
revitalized
problem.
and
Yeah, well,
redone, they might.
What about the people though that
Yeah.
live there?
Though, because if you're going from a mobile home to like a cottage home, that would probably increase property values, and how do we accommodate the community that already exists there, because they already can barely afford what they're in.
Yeah, that's a good.
To tap into all those other resources that are out there, both the tax credits, the federal funds, the county funds, and they agreed to put a covenant on the property that they want to sell it, to go at certain people. That's how you figure that affordability. And I think that we make that's a great, we fix the sewage problem. Sounds horrible. Yeah. Putting that under the wilderness, probably better quality housing, same footprint, and longer lasting and more likely.
Energy efficient. Energy efficient.
I'll put
Bicycles wherever trail. Because I've been in so many trailers. There's no insulation, they're drafty, they're empty halls, they're horrible.
So how are these
Everybody
mobile,
likes stuff.
how are these mobile home communities zoned currently? I mean, so how are these mobile home, communities zoned currently? So, for example, if one were to go under, obviously somebody owns the underlying land. How is that currently zoned and what can be put there in this place?
It's, correct me if I'm wrong, just so you know, it is a lower residentially zoned, district. I think it's like an R2-ish,
Okay.
maybe R5, I don't know if it's R5. But it is a special exception. So what that means is the developer came in at one time, or if they came in with their special exception, they applied to be able to hear. It's not just a by right thing. If I buy a house for R1, I can build one house because that's my right. I don't have to go through an extra process, right? But this person most likely came in and said, hey, I want to build a mobile home park here. I have to get additional approval on top of it. So what would happen is if this developer walked away, sold whatever, a new developer came in with the same zoning category, they would have to do the same special exception process as of right now. Now maybe the code's changed since that came in, but there is no high density residential zoning in Region A.
I think that some people got, I think, this is what I remember, and my memory could be wrong, but I believe that some got special exceptions on even RA to do these. Mobile home parks. I'm not sure, but it's possible.
Right, so but the zoning, if that person's using is the property, the zoning doesn't go with that property.
For RA states, but.
The zoning states.
But not the mobile.
It's not a special exception.
Yeah, but then they're gonna come forward to a group like this and say, hey, it's time to rezone because we have things to do or now we have this. So that's what we have to be ready for, right?
So if the owner of the land on which the mobile home park sits sells that land, the new owner of the land, are they obligated to keep the mobile homes there? I mean, can't they just say the next day? you
Technically,
all
they
need-"
can't because they have to go get a special exception, right?
That's true.
So you can have a mobile home park through a special, the only way to get a mobile home park in this county is through a special exception. And you can have that in every residential zoning category up to R15. So RA, RLD, R1, R2, R5, R10, R15. So essentially every zoning category residentially in Region A, someone could apply to have use a special exception, have a mobile home park in Region A.
If a new owner came in, are there any laws that say they couldn't evict the people who are currently there because they want to redevelop it?
I would have to talk to our development team about that.
Wouldn't they have to kick everybody out because they don't have the special exception? They have to go apply for it?
I would have to see, so I know when you can, there's some transferable things on certain zoning categories. I'd have to talk to the development about that too.
Yeah.
I don't think if they sold tomorrow, everybody's homeless.
Yeah, there'd be something in their contract. I mean, I imagine.
So,
Yeah.
but I can look into that. I can get you guys more information. If that's what you guys are interested in. But anyway, back to the house. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up? Anything you want to discuss? Because we have the evening to discuss housing and schools on the two topics for the night.
I have a quick question. So since we're zoning and land, I know this school guy left, but this might be a good question for him. But how do they determine the land on which schools are built?
So where they're gonna build?
Yeah, like how do they acquire that land? Like I remember when they built Severn Run High School, because I went to Spalding, and at the time they bought out that farm, the county, Papa John's, and then that was like a whole thing. Is there like a special process for that they like? I guess South County wouldn't be a place that they'd be looking to build a new school, but if they did, they would just acquire like private land.
Essentially,
Okay.
there's a whole real estate division that the county has. They help schools acquire land, they help parks acquire land, they help DPW acquire land for different facilities. So the county would buy.
Okay.
And if you're worried about that happening, you can look in their capital budget process and, because they put it in.
Okay, $200 million
Yeah, but you look in their capital, like they have different
capital
budgets.
expenditures.
Yeah.
Sure.
On the schools thing also, I think I brought this up before, I'm sorry, but I'd like to better understand how school bus routes are made and why there's such a lack of students taking advantage of school buses and parents instead individually driving their children to school all the time, because that's just, it's really adding to the traffic. Yeah, and they're not taking advantage of school buses, plus it's an environmental degradation.
The only thing I can see in my neighborhood is two things. One is a mom has to get to work, so she takes her kid on the way to work or whatever, instead of just making her kid go on the bus, and the kid's in high school, she could definitely get on the bus. And number two is the kid doesn't want to ride the bus, so the mom just takes her to school instead of making her take the bus. I haven't seen any situation where it's, I don't have the, it's not the little kids, right? I'm out of that time of my life, so I only see the older kids right now. I don't know that it's the kids start later and I have to get to work, so therefore, I don't know that.
Yeah, I've also heard, like, I remember you saying, like, there was a time, and maybe it still is, like, it was extremely, undependable. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, that has stopped.
That's where.
Like, the buses weren't showing up, but that hasn't happened. That was like 2 years ago.
The school system has a new, they did a study and there's a new transportation office. Until just 2 years ago, they were just doing it on index cards. And just basing it on, this is how we've always set up, there's always been a bus stop here, and not really looking at
Oh,
what children actually were.
I gave up.
And kids were having to pass their own.
I just started driving.
To, yeah,
Because the buses never show
it
up.
has been a problem, but I. They.
It's often a situation of an extra 20 minutes in the morning for the kid to get ready and not having to freak out that the bus is coming. We have I've got a elementary school and a middle school in a house, and their mom takes them every morning, but they come home with a bus. And I grumble about it. I rode my bike to school, I rode, but, it's that much less stressful in the morning, and I think that's part of it. Because otherwise, they've got to go, from where we live, way down to the mobile home park, pick a million kids up there, come back again, and, it's just, it's hard.
Can I have some questions about your notes? So the top one, what is that?
This is just, when we started, Dana was mentioning, the family that is, a school teacher and I believe was a firefighter that live in this community, but can no longer afford to live here because they're being priced out of the market. So that was just, I jotted it down. It didn't sound like there was a real, concern. You guys have concern for that. I didn't really hear a specific recommendation come out of it, but it's a note so that maybe staff can go back and look and see if there's any way we can, formulate a recommendation from hearing you guys talk about that.
Or put in the text of the plan somewhere about the emphasis of helping the middle income arms.
I think that's a normal cycle, to be honest with you. And you see this in it, over the decades, switches from area to area because where the jobs are, the housing tends to not be affordable. So people will move out further into the suburbs where it's affordable, except then over the years, it doesn't become affordable because everybody wants to live there. Then people move back to the inner city and the cycle just continues.
I think that might be the crux of what worries me now that you put a pin on it, is that if it was once affordable, so everybody moved out here, I don't want it to then get crowded because people are, can't afford in the higher density areas, they come out here, and we haven't thought about, is that the part of the cycle that we're in where we become crowded?
Oh, right.
I would rather do the redevelopment. I would rather find ways to make rent affordable than allow more density in order to accommodate.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? I think
Yeah,
just,
Commuter traffic.
or have.
But
a
I mean, one of
traffic for school crowding.
I commute into DC several times a week, and, when I see developments happening in PG County, right there around Andrews Air Force Base, high density townhomes and all that, and I see that as taking pressure to some extent off Anne Arundel County because the PG County is an acceptable place to live, or now than perhaps it was perceived to be in the past. So I see that as a good thing, but again, the jobs are outside the county.
But what I see in PG County is that 301 corridor has mid-mansions, condominiums of apartments all the way down, and I just want to make sure that we're planning so that does not happen.
Yeah, but there's.
Whether
those
it's
affordable.
Galesville or wherever,
So as far as condominium, I mean, I can't, McMansions, as Eric mentioned, as long as they're meeting the zoning code, but for that aspect, for like condominiums, like a lot of Region 8 is the rural agricultural zoning district where you are limited to 1 per 20. So you're not, it's not feasible to develop condos.
or apartments, or
And one thing
whatever,
to add-
multifamily housing.
One thing to add on to, and we'll talk about more this next meeting, is the development policy area for most, I would say 90% of Region 8 is rural and agricultural. And that has a different, and if you guys remember, one of the first meetings in this building was I talked about the different DPAs, development policy areas, and it broke it down to which ones kind of do which. And if you guys remember, the rural and agricultural limited development, right? And again, it doesn't mean no development, but it means limited development. And I think what we try to do as staff is really make sure we're following these guidelines through these development policy areas, as well as other regulations and other policies set forth in Plan 2040 to help guide the future development. And because Region 8 is what it is, we're regarding the development policy area, I think that's really going to help guide these zoning conversations and talk about the future of developments and talk about how the increase or not of the zoning categories are going to be impacted in these next couple of months. So, but again, we'll talk about more of that next month.
So I just, my question was, what did that mean? And I hear almost like two different things, you know, when I listen to you in my ears, you know, not that you're saying different things. So the affordability for middle income earners, and the thing that you stated is kind of potentially cyclical in some way, shape or form. And or, you know, what I'm hearing though is what you're really saying is it's a sad thing to see, and we still want to preserve what we have. Which doesn't
Or at least plan. Like, his plan, like, if we're really creating a plan for the future, we could should consider worst case scenario and how do we avoid that, you know what I mean?
No, I hear you. That's not what I read on that. At all. In fact, I read the opposite.
Oh, okay.
So it's clear on what was meant when that went up there, and I didn't know that's where that came from.
Which is why I encourage the study of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And then the other one I see down there, it says support opportunities to rehabilitate mobile home parks while maintaining the existing community. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, we're talking about, the, maybe rehabilitate isn't the best word, but I heard, you know, the specifically about like the septic issues that are going on down there, and that we need to address those, and maybe, you know, some like TLC for like revitalizing the neighborhood in some ways, but we don't want to like price out the existing community that is currently living there.
And what I've also heard from Eric is that this place is privately owned. And, you know, as a business, that's what this person is, they fail, right? So the job of, and I'm not talking about the housing, we're talking about the concept of a business. So if I go and do a business and I fail, is the county going to bail me out every time I fail? And the answer is absolutely not. So in this case, though, the county already is planning to bail them out with the sewage situation. So I think from our perspective, it's a matter of what happens next. And so if that's already, that thing is left station, which is probably a really good thing. It's county funds that are going to do something that a private business owner failed at. That's a whole other conversation. And none of us here want to see anybody be homeless. That's not the point. Point is, what is the best and highest use of that land and funding, and is it one of these kind of programs that you were mentioning? And so I just want to be careful about the wording of that note, and that I think that what I think I heard is everybody wants people to have a place to live. Everybody wants it to be affordable if people are living in mobile homes. However, it's a delicate concept, and it does require study, yet the county's going to do what the county's going to do. If the county's going to bail these folks out, they're going to bail them out. What was the cost of that infrastructure for the new septic?
So, level from that, we got that one.
Yeah.
5 million or something?
How much?
4 to 6 million?
Yeah, it's like 4 million.
Yeah.
You get to keep the
Yeah, I was
property.
gonna say, it was more than that.
No, I don't think so.
It was 8 million.
No, I don't think you get to keep the
He
property.
doesn't get to keep the property.
And they mentioned something too about like Chesapeake Bay Foundation, like different grants they were
So
receiving.
it's in the county CIP. It was just presented to the planning advisory board. It's called minor systems upgrades. I don't know the project number. I could pull it up Yeah, I can find it if you really want it
I
right now.
often do the job for one person.
Yeah,
I did, and I'll do it now.
it's to provide this septic upgrade for them or to facilitate some kind of local sewer system service that would only service the mobile home park itself and not be expandable into the community to disrupt the rural agricultural surrounding community. So I don't have the exact price put on it, but if you want it, you can go on the PAB website for, yeah, I'll just do it.
No, I'm just what happens to the,
Property owner.
yeah, what happens to the property owner? Does he have to pay for this?
No.
No,
Is he assessed against it?
so
Remember we
that's
talked
under
about
the
this
purview of the
down at,
Department of Public Works. That's not really the scope of this conversation.
No, yeah, I'm just
What was
wondering
that?
for,
We were down,
He's got.
yes, Chuck Bay. This was we talked about.
Yeah.
We were down at Chuck Bay.
So one thing,
Go ahead, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, and you made a good point. Thank you for helping us clarify these points. But again, I just wanted to mention, like other meetings, these are rough bullet points for us as staff to sit back on. We're gonna go back to the office, re-listen to this meeting and come up with more polished strategies to present to you as well as members of the public. And you guys are gonna be able to really provide input there. So this is far from complete. This is far from done. This is, again, our as staff's starting point, make sure we're at least heading down a certain path that we think we hear tonight. And again, we're gonna come back to you with these to make sure that path was the correct path. So thank you for keeping us accountable, and we will be back with these, and hopefully we are exactly what you guys are.
Yeah, I think there's probably a really great opportunity to study ways that might feel ethically appropriate while also trying to have some accountability for actions that affect a large group of people. So, yeah, that's it.
And I guess I would just reinforce that if you haven't learned that housing is not comfort, so you don't have to do every year, the families, you have the children, it's already there. Look at ways to take that existing property and improve it, get it up to code with the water and sewer, and then build new community for that same.
Oh, yeah, I think that's an ideal, right?
Sort of that's where that infill, preserving have here, keeping that housing, and maybe, if you have to, a lot of super dense, but something more attractive, and spaces for those farmers, or for those farmers, so maybe they don't have a place to live farm, but you expand this little more home park a little bit, and then that's
I think we've been pretty clear that we're not looking for expansion. I understand the potential demand. But I think that was pretty clear now. I'm not saying that we're not gonna change our minds, and I appreciate that.
I was saying, you mentioned, someone was mentioning farm workers, that a little bit more, because they are. Other needs that you also have.
Yeah, I mean, I think the farm, if a farmer needs housing, they're gonna definitely push for it, and I think that's certainly a good bit to put in there that we could study that as well, for sure.
I will say that, I think a lot of the farms have tenant houses on them. And, just as a positive note, they have tenant houses, and or if you're in ag land preservation, they're generally, as restrictive as those easements can be, there's generally provision that allows for farm worker house on that easement, so.
And if they did redo, or I guess Eric, whoever it is, if they did redevelop whatever, the places like the mobile home park, is there anything that we need to suggest or ask for a study on about ancillary businesses and things around it so that we can also have a say in build up of grocery stores, gas stations, whatever else would go around that?
We have a
Redo
lot
and
of-
improve
we
and
have a lot
expanded
of
housing?
Discussion on that in our early meetings, and I think that's coming next month. My guess is with Wasted Corner because of the proximity of the mobile home to Wasted Corner. So we did have an extensive conversation. I'm not sure if you were here for that one or not. but we
I don't
did.
think so. She had just mentioned building capacity around housing, and that sort of raised some thoughts that I think needed maybe be put in writing from us about what does that actually mean, and
So I think on that point, if we're kind of finished with the housing conversation, I'm going to transition just for a second to a little bit of homework I want to give you guys. So we're talking about Wason's Corner. That's the only designated village center in Region 8. Village centers, just for a quick recap, that's where you ideally will walk, or there's more types of uses there. There's maybe a combination of housing and commercial. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's downtown Annapolis. It doesn't necessarily mean it's Washington DC or World Town Center, anything like that. It can be very unique and intimate to the community that it's in and around.
Hey, if you got a pinball hall, tractor supply, and a Dollar General, that's all.
So, what I want to ask the group to do the next couple of weeks is go online, find some pictures of what you view, the vision of Oasis Corner to be. It may be exactly what it is today. That's perfectly fine.
Nah, we need a new liquor store.
But go think about it. It doesn't have to be anything, within Anne Arundel County. It can be somewhere in the state of Maryland, somewhere in the country, somewhere in the world. What you really truly want to see in this area, what you think it should be, and just come back and just be prepared to discuss that. Ideally, if you can send some photos to staff so we can kind of share them with the group, that'd be fantastic. But again, just come prepared to discuss your ideas for that area, because this is the one area that is, again, designated that needs to be discussed as part of this plan moving forward.
Yeah.
You want that specific April meeting?
Yeah, for the April, and I have the date of the last slide.
So we talked about this before, but has there been any opportunity to like, reach out to the people that live there and get a sense of what they might be interested in?
Yeah, so good question. We are working with a nonprofit person who help out with a lot of outreach. They're helping with meetings and data. And I think in 2 weeks, I think I'm meeting with a group down there as well.
That's
So
great.
I have to check my notes and everything. But yeah, we are in communication. We are trying to get involved and make sure, while this group is very important and very representative of the whole region, we do want to hear specifically from that community who live there and work there each and every day as well. And whatever we find out, we are going to present back to you as well. This isn't, we're not going to keep it secret. We're not going to wait for the last minute. We want to share everything. We make everything as collaborative as possible. We're trying to be as transparent as possible from a staff point of view. But we are working with that community. Absolutely.
Great. Great. And I think the things we talked about before were doing exactly that. I'm glad you brought that up. And walkability and green space and farmers market, or at least farmers produce that's not sold elsewhere to be brought there for a lower price point. I think groceries, I think was mentioned. We have the Bay Area Health Community Center there now. And but yeah, I think it was even talk of rural agricultural center. Yeah, rural agricultural center where farmers could come and actually process their products, value-added products, and also offer their stuff to sell to the public. And it was community gardens that I read a bunch of news about this one.
They want a bigger space there.
So we can take a break if you guys want, but we have one more thing to discuss. It's the vision statement. So if we want to take a break, it is 8 o'clock. We're running out of time.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the vision statement as we left it from the last meeting with the revision from one SAC member who gave us some final edits. I'll let you think about a minute. So overall, how does this fit with the idea when you hear Region 8? That's the question we're trying to hammer down. Is this, now again, if you guys can remember at the very beginning, the very first meeting, I think we had a consensus continuum. It was, can I live with it? All the way from I hate it, can I live with it? I absolutely love it. Where do you think this fits on that scale for you? Is the question we're trying to answer.
I think it's really good. I'm wondering if Region 9's, we should just kind of lay them side by side to see if, if we're doing something.
So Region 9 is one of,
I don't know.
Region 9 is one of the longest vision statements I've ever worked on. It's got a lot of information in there. So if it works, so I don't know if you guys, all y'all here, we had a cyber issue. It's currently working now. Sometimes it's a toss up if the link's going to work or not.
Also, would you mind sending out a solicitation for us to send back information about the wastewater vision?
Yes.
Thank you. With images or whatever people have that they want to see there.
This was almost slide.
Yeah, I gotta scroll down to zoom in.
Oh, my, wow.
Jeez, you please.
That's a little much.
Yeah. Nobody that's-
Yeah, maybe a little pearl from there. Find reserve waterways, shorelines, parks, farms, and small communities within Region 9 have been protected and enhanced for the natural, historical, and cultural significance of the area will be respected. Conservation and restoration of natural shorelines, farms will be prioritized to maintain quality of life. Agricultural and maritime industries and sustainable level of tourism will continue to be key parts of the economy and culture of the region. Development will be limited with a focus on redevelopment and existing centers and commercial activity. Each community within the region will work together to provide equitable access to economic opportunities, first schools, recreation, waterways, healthcare, food security, and housing for all community members. Investments in infrastructure will make it safer and easier to access our communities, whether walking, biking, driving, or on public transit. Working in partnership with government, businesses, and private individuals, the region will become more resilient to flooding and climate change. Wow. The ultimate measure of success will be the conservation of the unique geographical, cultural, and historical heritage of Chesapeake Coast community for future generations.
You can take a deep breath now.
And you essentially read the entire plan.
I think ours is really good.
Yeah. Especially with the-
They're underwater.
Yeah.
Less is
Start
worse.
adopting some of that, 'cause we'll now-
This is fine.
But, yeah.
I mean, it's we don't have anything about environment, so we have the word. environment.
Natural landscape.
Natural landscape.
Natural landscape,
And
okay.
the other thing they had in there in a couple of instances was historical, and I don't think we've really talked about that much. I don't know if there's.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
true. There are
like
lots of
historical
historical properties
preservation.
as well, especially, beautiful farms that have historical.
Natural and historical landscape.
Cultural, historical, our preference so much